What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. I'm here in Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to another episode of the REI Live podcast.
Oh, sorry.
The Real Estate Investing Live podcast. We have Mr. Scott Jelinek in the studio with us. How's it going, Scott?
Fantastic. So just so you know, I was just going to lunch, and then Brian kidnapped me, brought me here, and said, no, we're just stopping off real quick. I just need you to film something real quick, and then we'll go eat lunch.
Okay. This is going to be a great show. This is episode number 100 of our interview show.
It is an honor to be on episode number 100.
And not only that, we have Scott Jelinek back for the third time. This is number 3. And do you remember this? You started a podcast.
I did.
And you have 5 episodes or something?
Don't knock my episodes. When you know what you're doing, you can get all the information out in a short amount of time. I understand it took you 100 episodes to get this information out, but some of us can do it more efficiently. That's all. Don't judge.
All right, so you have 5 episodes out. So this is why this is important. This is why I'm bringing it up. You interviewed me on one of those episodes, and the sound quality is terrible. Like, you had no idea what you were doing. I trusted you.
Still don't.
And I trusted you. We recorded them back to back. I recorded for yours and vice versa. And I had to use the terrible sound quality for my podcast, on my podcast. It was terrible.
That's a shame.
So we redid it maybe last spring, not quite a year ago. And you were pressed for time. So we only did like a 25-minute podcast. Usually we do 35, 40, 45 minutes or more. So you're pressed for time. So now we have Scott, held him hostage, handcuffed him, brought him to the office. He is here in Birmingham, Alabama, and we're going to record a podcast.
I don't have a car. I have no way to leave. I'm more or less a prisoner.
You can't even get out of this office either. So real quick, let me just give you guys a little bit of context for those that are brand new to our podcast. We interviewed the very best real estate investors all throughout the country, entrepreneurs, business leaders. Scott is definitely that. He's out of Virginia Beach, Virginia, the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, which I say that a lot now. I sound like a local when I say that. If you have not listened to Scott's keynote, if you were there, he came and spoke at our RIA a couple weeks ago. We replayed that Sunday on our podcast just a couple of days ago. If you've not listened to his keynote on slow flips, you really need to. We're going to talk a lot about slow flips. I've got some follow-up questions I want to ask you about it, and I think a lot of people have kind of sent in some questions. I'm going to kind of repeat some of their not concerns, but their questions about the actual slow flip process. So if you have not listened to his keynote, go back a couple of days ago, listen to that keynote so you can kind of get some perspective of what we're going to be talking about. So to give a quick recap of what you did talk about, though, because I know you say that like no one's going to go back and do that. If you want the full breadth of what Scott spoke on, you definitely need to go back. If you just want the Cliff Notes version, give us the Cliff Notes version of slow flips.
Well, the Cliff Notes version, like I said to you earlier, is we buy houses like a car and we sell them like a house. And what I mean by that is we buy them on 5-year money and we sell them on 30-year money. And much like a rental, we have them for the long term. However, we're selling them with owner financing, so we don't have to handle any of the maintenance, repairs, turnover, and people have pride of ownership in taking care of them. It's an interesting thing that people don't realize. You buy a car for $50,000, $100,000, $80,000, and you have a 5-year note on it. Nobody thinks twice about that. You buy a house for $60,000, $80,000, and they give you a 30-year mortgage on it. It's the same amount of money. It's just a different structure, and it's amazing. So we try and buy them like a car, sell them like a house. Buy them for 5 years, sell them for 30.
Got it. So that's what you mean. Buy like a car as in a 5-year note. So
Exactly.
You're getting private money to buy this.
Buy it and have them paid off free and clear within 5 years.
Right. So you get your note taken care of. Well, you got 25 extra years of note that it's all profit.
Pure
they're
profit.
paid off.
Correct.
So one of the questions and if you went back and listened to it, one of the questions that someone brought up was and you even brought this up in your talk, you said the average person only stays in their home for 5 to 7 years.
The average American, not just my people, but the average American, the average homeowner in America only stays in their home. They say, I think it's 5 to 7 years. And so with turnover, that 25 years of pure profit can basically go on indefinitely, or the person may stay and pay it off, which is fine, or they can sell it, which they're allowed to, in which case you get paid off, or refi it and pay you off, or leave. Either way, you win.
Either way, you have paid off your loan.
Correct.
And you own it free. You don't, I guess you kind of technically don't own it, sort of, because talk about why I'm saying sort of, because it's not, you are selling it with owner financing, but you're not recording the deed.
Right, so technically they're the owner. They have all the benefits and burdens of ownership. The deed stays in your name, and they have a contract for deed. As long as they fulfill the terms in the contract, then they become the owner. They have all the benefits and burdens of ownership.
And when you take it back, if you have to take it back, people are typically leaving.
Yes.
What do you do in the case that someone does not pay? It's not really an eviction, is it?
If they don't pay, it is an eviction.
How?
We do a regular eviction. I don't know your laws here in Alabama, but in my area, we file an unlawful detainer at the courthouse. We have a court date, same as we would have for a tenant, and then the judge grants possession, then the sheriff comes and handles the eviction.
But they're not a tenant if they have ownership, correct?
Correct, but that's the way the court sees it.
Okay, so definitely, this is something that I think you definitely need to check state to state.
Right.
This could definitely be something that's different state to state. I think in Alabama, we would do like a lease option in your scenario. We would lease it to them with the option to buy it.
So I used to do lease options, and the reason I stopped is because of what I just said about benefits and burdens.
Mm-hmm.
A judge ruled against me, and more or less he said, while it's a lease option, you are still the landlord, which means you are still bound by the Landlord-Tenant Act. We still, if the heat doesn't work, by law you have to fix it.
Right.
If the toilet doesn't flush, by law you have to fix it. With a land contract, they are the owner. The courts see them as the owner, and there's no laws making me fix it.
So that's why I don't understand the eviction part of it. If they see them as the owner, why is an eviction not a foreclosure? That's definitely going to be state to state. So guys, I think you definitely need to check with your attorney when you talk about that part of this model.
Yeah, and I had somebody talk to me about that once before, about saying to do the foreclosure, and I'm like, well, who am I foreclosing on? I own it. So you
don't own it.
Well, the deed is still in my name.
Because you haven't filed it.
Right, the deed is in my name, so you couldn't file a foreclosure against yourself.
Right.
So again, I'm not a lawyer. I just know this is how we've been doing it for many years.
This is a sticky part of this the slow flip model is you definitely need to check state to state in this particular arena for sure. So let's kind of go on to the next topic. I brought this up as one of my questions. A lot of people were wondering about Dodd-Frank. And what you said, if you went back and listened to Scott's keynote, his response to Dodd-Frank was, it's never been tested.
It's never been tested, but not only that, you're allowed to do, I believe it's 3 deals per year you're allowed to do. And then you're also allowed to do deals in an entity. So you can have multiple deals in different entities. But on top of that, you can do, like if you had a husband and wife, for instance, she'd be allowed to do 3, you're allowed to do 3. Okay. There's multiple different ways that you can do it, or you can do it the proper way, which they want you to do, which is to have an underwriter, and have an underwriter underwrite the loan, and then you can get it passed that way. The other way is to investors. When you sell to investors, correct, or when you sell it as an investment, there is no regulation then. That's then right. It's a commercial transaction, so there's no regulation on that. And most of ours are in fact to investors.
So if I want to talk about 2 of those things you just mentioned. If you are getting it underwritten, you have to almost get like a mortgage license or something like that, because now you're a mortgage originator. You don't have to.
You have to have the underwriter. The underwriter has to be licensed.
And so when it goes through the underwriting process, a lot of these people that you're selling to probably aren't going to get qualified.
If they didn't qualify, obviously, if you took that route and went through the underwriting and they didn't qualify, you wouldn't be able to sell them.
Yeah, and I feel like that's going to happen a lot.
It very likely would.
Let's switch gears to talk about market-specific numbers. And obviously, you can only speak to your area. I can really only speak to my area. But I do want to talk about, maybe project what could be going on in other markets to where we can try to figure out how people could do this model. And again, if you haven't listened to Scott's keynote, you're gonna kind of be lost right now. So I highly recommend that you just go ahead and stop this and pick up. You need to listen to his keynote. It's only like an hour long, and it's great information. So I highly recommend that you do that. But let's talk about market specifics. In your market, you say you can get a pretty good deal on a property. You're gonna buy a house with an ARV somewhere between 70 and 100K. You're buying that property for somewhere around 20 to 30, no more than 30.
No more than 30.
And these houses are more times than not a wreck.
Not always a wreck. We have a lot of them that are pretty nice. Occasionally we get some that are in deplorable condition, but for most of the time they're pretty decent. My general rule is I want them to be livable. I want them to be livable, need work, but yet be livable. Not 100% of the time they are, but most of the time they are.
Would you agree that you're getting a pretty dang good deal at 30K?
Absolutely.
So this is a model you're going to have to either be doing your own marketing to
Yes.
get these deals, or working with someone who's going to bring you a good deal.
Or, so we do get some deals, or some of my people get deals off of MLS deals, which I'm very much against getting deals off of the MLS. However, these particular houses don't have any retail sales in those neighborhoods, so they're not sought after. So unlike all the rehabs where investors are all competing for them, and it's, and MLS, in my opinion, is more or less dead for those, with these slow flip houses, a lot of times they're just sitting on there and there's nobody really looking at them because there is no retail sale there.
So let's talk about retail sales for a second, because you mentioned to me kind of offline a little bit that you are, if there are no retail sales in the area. When you say retail sales, you're differentiating between a turnkey rental.
Somebody who
type of
renovated
sale,
it and put it on the market. That's what I consider a retail sale, a fully renovated on the market house.
And there's none of that going on. What kind of other sales are happening in these areas?
All we would have then is distress sales or regular homeowner sales that aren't renovated.
Got it. So why is that important? How does that apply to this?
Well, because that's how we come up with our ARV. We usually, whenever we do ARV, it's supposed to be the renovated retail sale price. And if there are no renovations going on in the area, we don't have an actual, we can't factor in that if we wanted to renovate it and put it on the market, this is what it would sell for, because we just don't know.
So when I said earlier your projected sales price is 70, 80, 90K, somewhere around there, it's really, there's no true way to know that,
right,
except from maybe the tax appraisal.
Tax assessment, we can go by some of those sites that I don't really like the Zillow estimate and stuff like that, and come up with what they give you as a value for the area. But there is no real ARV. Because if there was, we would just renovate it and sell them.
For sure. So
Yeah.
if Zillow, do you run across some of these where Zillow would say the property's only worth 50 or 60K, but you're still selling for 80 or 90?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. If the city assessment's higher on it, or if we have other sales in the area, absolutely.
So how, and I already know the answer to this, and I'm not trying to be combative when I ask this, there's some people who may be asking this question to themselves. What do you do in the case where Zillow says it's worth 50, tax appraisal maybe says 60, and you're selling it for 90?
What do you mean, what do? I sell it.
For 90?
Yeah. Or whatever.
What's the justification that you could do something like that?
If that's what I believe it's worth, that's anything, and this is anything, your car, your watch, your house, your computer, anything is worth what someone's willing to pay for it, period. That's what determines value. Value is what somebody is willing to pay for it. So if I decide I want to sell something for 89 and somebody's willing to pay 89, guess what? It's worth 89, regardless of what Zillow says. It is worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. So that's how I justify it. If somebody says, there's no way I would pay 89 for it, I'm like, well, you're not my buyer. The next guy's paying 89 and he's happy with it. So guess what? It is worth 89. Someone else is willing to pay 89, that's its value.
Some people would say that you're taking advantage of people.
Some people would. And some people would say that I'm actually helping people that have no possible alternative having a house. I've had people that are living in hotels because they can't qualify they're paying $2,000, $3,000 a month to live in a hotel because nobody will qualify them for an apartment or for a house, and we finally can put them into a place where they're paying $875 a month. They are more than thrilled with the fact that they're able to buy a house and make it their home. And most of my people, if you were to talk to them, there's no way they see any negatives to it. They are more than happy with the fact that they got this situation and this deal, and they don't have to worry about at the end of the year they're going to get a rent increase notice. They don't have to worry about that the owner decided he wanted to sell and they got to move. It's their house. They can make it their home for the foreseeable future for the next 30 years. Or as long as they wanted to.
And the attractiveness to most people is really the payment.
Correct. And the non-qualifying.
It's more about the payment, not having to qualify for a loan, than it is what the actual purchase price is.
Right, because the purchase price literally is irrelevant. If they were paying, if they were to rent the house next door and the rent is $875 a month, well, why wouldn't you want to buy the one right over here that the same payment's $875 a month, and now you own it, and you don't have to worry about any of those things I talked about, like the rent increases and the owner wanting to sell it and anything else that may come with it.
You mentioned that I think during your talk that a lot of your buyers are actual non-owner occupants.
Correct. A lot of our buyers are investors.
So, and you still do the same. So what does your investor do? They buy it, they fix it up, and they rent it out.
Yep.
And you're the bank.
Correct.
For 30 years.
Yep.
And they're paying you $875.
Some of them are a little more, some are a little less. Yeah.
And they would turn around and rent that property for how much?
They might get $975, $1075.
So let's talk about that, because I think that it's important, because it's a national show, and we have obviously a big following here in Birmingham. We've got a big following in a lot of different California, Texas, some other places, Georgia. I want to try to talk about these numbers because, and obviously we're only going to be able to speculate. I can talk about Birmingham, you can talk about Virginia, and that's it. But we can speculate. Your numbers are not are not making sense for our area at all. So, and there's probably some of you that are listening like, there's no way I can buy a house for $30,000 and resell it for $90,000 and get that kind of rent. That's like buying it for $30 and it rents for $1,000. That's pretty crazy. So let's just take Birmingham for instance. To take a type of property, because I've seen the houses. You showed me pictures of some of those houses. I've seen those houses. We have houses that look like that here in Birmingham. We call those D areas or war zone areas. Those are tough areas in our town. Those are areas where Birmingham might be a little bit different, but we don't want to get out of our car at night in these areas. But we can get these properties for 5, 10, 15,000 or even less. I've had people deed me over these properties. In your opinion, based on what I just got done saying, are these good properties to do this method with?
If I can get a property for $5,000 and it's livable, absolutely. And if it's a bad neighborhood that I don't want to go into, now my general rule of thumb is I don't go anywhere where I don't feel safe. Now you only saw pictures of the houses, you didn't see anything live or the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods are nice, so it's not like it's high crime or bad areas. I don't know your areas out here, but as long as it's, personally, you don't really have to go there. You can do it through a system where you don't even have to go to the property. But if I got a property for $5,000, absolutely, I would own and finance it or slow flip it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're already doing that. And so, I think that it's actually a really good.
And you got to think also, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. There's investors out there who want to be, want to be real estate investors, or they are real estate investors that don't have cash and don't have financing. Say you have an investor who's a contractor. He can do all the work himself, but he doesn't have the money to pay for the house. So you just got it for $5,000. Well, you might own and finance it to him for $30,000. And he's thrilled. He doesn't know what you bought it for or care. You're the one who found the deal. What you bought it for is irrelevant. But now he's thrilled. He doesn't have to come up with $30,000. He doesn't have to get hard money. You do an in-house closing. Now he can get to work on the house himself. Take as long as he needs because you did a 30-year term on or whatever term you did, and then he gets to sell it and make his profit. It works out for everybody.
So there are certain areas, and I think that this might be what you're saying, and this is how we might be able to apply this to whatever area you're in. There's certain areas of your town, whoever's listening to this, to where the only strategy to make money in these areas is to own or finance it.
Yeah, so that's kind of the way I make my decisions on these houses. When I get a lead or an appointment or a contract on a house, if I can wholesale it right now and make a $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 check wholesaling it, I do that 100% of the time. If I can wholesale it, I do. The houses that I end up keeping as slow flips are ones that really have no retail sales there, and so the only exit strategy is going to either be for me to slow flip it or to wholesale it to somebody who's going to keep it as a rental or keep it as a slow flip themselves. So typically I end up keeping those.
So if you're listening to this, wherever you are, if you're a wholesaler in particular, I think a lot of wholesalers get tripped up with the properties that there's no one there. I don't have a buyer. So your buyer, you have twofold. I call them a wannabe investor, what you just got done talking about. You can find those on Craigslist all day long. And you can, if you actually go ahead and take down this property for 5, 10, 15,000, maybe in Scott's case 30,000, go ahead and take it down. You can literally resell these properties to a wannabe investor who you can find them. You can relist on the MLS, you can put it on Zillow, you can put it on Craigslist. You can find these people and they would be glad to pay a monthly fee to get it owner finance. And then secondly, the person who wants to actually live in it, the owner occupant. But what percentage of yours would you say are owner occupied?
Very, very few. So we don't fill too many new ones per year because I have 108 now and they're all filled. So it's not that we have a constant filling of them. So over the years, obviously we have some of them that are, but over the last several years, most of the people that have been taking them the last several years are investors.
So one thing I feel like everybody here has to keep in mind the most is you are going to be heavily regulated if you are selling to owner occupied. If you're
selling to owner occupied, obviously there's all kinds of regulations and protections in dealing with owner occupants.
Usury laws. Every state's going to have their own law. It's going to say this is the most you can charge for interest. I think Alabama's 8.9, but definitely check that in your state. So just be very careful. If it's me and I'm getting started, I want to sell this to a non-owner occupant almost exclusively, especially in the beginning if I'm new. And you need to actually write that in your paperwork. That if they do stay in it, they do live in it, they're violating the terms.
They're purchasing this property as an investment for the purpose of making a profit.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else you have to add? I think I've asked all my questions.
I don't think I have anything to add. Maybe you can free me from my prison and take me to lunch now, but
We just got back from lunch. You want to do another lunch?
No, I don't have anything to add.
So I do want to just kind of thank Scott publicly for coming to Birmingham, speaking to our group. We're recording this on the Friday before the Alabama-Mississippi State game, so you're not going to hear this for a couple of weeks. But hopefully, by the time you listen to this,
the upset of the year as Mississippi State beats Alabama. It's crazy. Such a small percentage of winning, but it's going to happen. Watch that.
Yeah,
it's going to be a crazy game.
Sure. Not sure about that, but thank you for your time, Scott. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time.
Yeah, thank you for doing this against your will. Appreciate you guys for listening to us, and if you're watching us on YouTube, we appreciate that. Hit subscribe. I don't care if you're listening to the podcast or you are watching us on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. We put out lots of great content. We would love to have you continue to watch and listen to our content and engage with it. We love you guys so much. Rate us, review us. We love you. See you next time.